Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today, we're joined by Director of Photography, Jarin Blaschke, who is celebrating his first Academy Award nomination for his stunning cinematography on Nosferatu, as well as the film's visionary director, Robert Eggers. This conversation was a live webinar we did recently with our partners at Sundance Collab, and we're grateful for the opportunity to bring the conversation to you on the podcast. It was great to welcome back Robert, who joined us a few weeks ago to discuss the sound of Nosferatu with the film's sound designer, supervising sound editor, and re-recording mixer, Damian Volpe. You can find links to that episode in our show notes. But today we're talking about the extraordinary visuals of Nosferatu, thanks to Jarin Blaschke's work and his long, ongoing collaboration with Robert. So that's where I wanted to start the conversation. After all, filmmaking is a collaborative art form, and these two have been working together for years on all of Robert's features and even his earlier short films. So how did this creative partnership begin? Here is director Robert Eggers.
My first short film, I shot myself, and it's a travesty. And somehow it's on YouTube. I don't know how that happened. But basically, when I was trying to get my second short film going, I had an interview with a very experienced cinematographer who was beginning to have a good career making feature films. And he said, your short's cool. It's not that I don't want to do it, but I think you'd be better off working with someone who was a little less experienced so that you don't get steamrolled. And he recommended an agency for me to look at some reels. And I looked at some reels, and the reel by this exotic European DP, Jarin Blaschke, impressed me very much. And I wrote him a long, earnest email talking about the Quay brothers and 19th century golden age fairy tale illustration, and he wrote back being interested in those things himself. And then we met, and I found out that he was Jarin Blaschke, and just a hipster like myself as we were then. I still am stuck in that rut a little bit. Jarin's become a grown-up. Thank you, Jarin.
My jeans are a little too skinny still, as you pointed out, but thank you.
Well, okay. So, and then, and then basically when I worked with him, I just realized that he was crazier than me, and every bit as much of a perfectionist. And what else could you want?
Jarin, what's your version of that story? Why did you sign on to Robert's madness back in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first period film that ever come into my email, and it it described it's Telltale Heart, and there's like no voiceover, right? So it's period film, no voiceover. He's talking about Arthur Rackham and everybody, the illustrators, and there are like smells in the script. So I want to meet this guy. And probably what nudged me even more is I was sleeping on my friend's couch, So there you go.
Well, Jarin, I also just want to point out, I mean, it makes perfect sense to me why Robert would hire you, because we're all on Zoom on hotel Wi-Fi, but you are brilliantly lit and composed in the frame, even on Zoom. So this all makes perfect sense.
There's a window right here. It's
let's see, available light. That's
I mean, there's a red brick building, so there's like a little red in there, but that's fine.
I'd love to for you guys to talk a little bit about the beginning of developing the look for Nosferatu. Robert, I understand that you compile lookbooks actually while you're writing. Is that the case? So how do you use that as an exploratory tool? What kind of images are you sharing with Jarin to kind of get the juices flowing on the conversation? Tell us a little bit about that part of the development process.
Well, a big part of the writing process for me is staying marinated in the world. So, I'm looking at these images for my own inspiration, and also searching for images with that have a kind of specificity about, what I'm looking for. Like it's part of the research process also is discovering like what is the architecture supposed to be in these places? What's the costuming supposed to be? And then also, atmospheric things that may be a little bit one side or another of 1838, but atmospherically feel like the movie that I'm trying to make. And so even before I'm sharing them and have really nailed them down and got them into a kind of honed and specific form that I'm ready to share with my heads of department. Like I'm looking at these images while I'm writing, and like the first, I'm watching movies that have to do like keep me marinated in the world, even if they're not things that I'm taking notes for deliberately to try to learn something from. They're keeping me in the mind space. I've got playlists going like with music that are keeping me in the mind space. So that's a big piece of it. But then, yeah, I start, I like this is part of the visual world building. So I like to share them early on to try to get my collaborators inspired, and hopefully there's some things that are familiar in a way that it evokes something from childhood memory and the feeling you want to have when watching a Gothic horror movie. And then hopefully there are some things that are surprising and new and bring my collaborators or help guide my collaborators in a different direction. And that's, the best thing about collaboration is that often that can, they'll springboard off of that and then take me somewhere else where I wasn't expecting,
Hmm.
I mean, that was vague, but
No. I appreciate that, Jarin. What do you remember any of the images in that first sort of lookbook, and kind of what was the jumping off point for you in terms of thinking about developing the look of the film?
Yeah, it's the lookbook, which is a mix of, anything from just like, costumes in a museum hanging to, romantic painting to stills from period films. It's kind of like, well, that's the most Hollywood. And, I kind of put them together as a mesh and try to find some middle point from, from that, but it's kind of like here's the shape of the cloud and we're somewhere in here, let's find it together. So, yeah, I think that's helpful for Rob to have all that while writing through prep, because he's kind of tweaking the script in prep. The Northman, there's just a lot of, I remember his office was always echoing with Viking music relentlessly, and but he's always in there. A lot of banging and shouting coming down the hall. Nosferatu is a little easier, a little more pleasant, and but there's always music going, and that's and that even the production office that that having that tone, and his office just covered in images. He looks like a serial killer with like all these like little pieces of paper with images like all over the place, but you go into his office and it's like dimly lit, like a single lamp, and it's kind of cool. So it's all that atmosphere is always there, even just like in what would be a bland, sterile industrial production office.
Yeah, well, now you've got me curious. I want to find out what the playlist is for Nosferatu.
It's good. It's really good.
How much did setting the film in 1830s Germany dictate or affect the look of the film? I mean, Jarin, you talked about romanticism, and I hate to use the word painterly in discussing the cinematography, but that was one of the words that came to my mind, especially on some of the daytime exteriors. So how much of that sort of what was going on in painting and art at that time influenced your thinking about the look of the film?
Jarin, I think like you let me do a little preamble, and then you should answer the question specifically as it applies to the film. But I think the Murnau film is called the German Expressionist silent film because of the era of cinema in which it was made. But compared to Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or like many of Murnau's films or whatever. It's not that expressionist. And I feel like that Murnau and Alban Grau and his collaborators were really more interested in German romanticism. And they reference quite clearly some romantic and Biedermeier paintings from Caspar David Friedrich and Johann Christian Dahl. And I think, part of the expressionist movement was a post-romantic movement, so that makes a lot of sense. But also, Dracula was written like, whatever, 25 years or something before Nosferatu was made. And so I imagine that they felt like setting it in the late 19th century was kind of like dorky and dated and not cool. And like back in the 1830s, that's when shit was really happening, And so part of my approach in writing this screenplay was trying to like understand where they were coming from, and so to look at it through that lens. Now, Jarin, you can speak how you filtered that information and
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it's just on camera. I mean, I'm not that. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I'm not like that inventive when it comes to lighting. So if it's, I know like let's use torches and how do you curate a thing and how do you embellish and polish and, distill, the best version of torchlight, but it's still, I'm not putting a backlight somewhere. I'm not, it's like it's based on the starting point is like what's the loveliest version of, what the scene would be. So if you have a torch or moonlight, what does that look like to my eye? Let's try to do that, and then there's like a bunch of testing with what are the lighting ratios that just nail like where we have to see what's going on, but also feel as much as it can feel like that experience to your eye. And, I don't think I think I've, a way to go, but obviously this is the most successful version of that, in my opinion. And then there's like a new frontier, which is the interior moonlight, which never frankly did before, and then if I do that again, it'll be even better. So, yeah, I don't know that I don't think I'm doing anything kind of crazy. I mean, it's not like I'm trying to make a painting. It's just like, well, Rob wrote a movie in this sort of room. Craig built this beautiful space. I know that directional light in a castle, you just pick the windows. I'll talk with Craig about where's the fireplace, where's the windows, but it's still based on, window light. And like, do you have a hard shaft or a soft or what? But I'd rather have it just come out of, I'd rather finesse the environment itself, as far as the torches and the windows and the quality, what sort of weather would be out the window, than, making something else,
the writing and the locations as the sets are built, as Jarin said, at the locations that we choose, and just the vibe of the movie, like, becomes romantic or whatever. But I think, but yeah, I think, Jarin's approach to lighting, as he describes, is always based on reality, even if it's the most beautiful version of reality. And, and nothing like is intended to be stylized aside from maybe just the fairy tale framing of a castle I think some of the framing is where things are a little more classical or considered.
Yeah, I think that's where that's where I feel like I'm really, giving of, if it's a scene where I have an idea for blocking, it's like that's probably where I, the most creative and coming out, something with maybe that I'm not directly referencing something, but if I have an idea, it's coming out of that, or it's in that realm. Lighting, I'm just trying to curate life. So yeah, let's make it 5 p.m. at this sort of feeling in this sort of room. So, and then all the look of it also comes down to these like tertiary elements, like what kind of optics just feel right. Like the little flare on the windows, like what is the lens that just feels nice? Let's just look at a bunch of those. Let's have lenses made, because we're very privileged in that we can do that now, and and see what that looks like. I wanted to shoot under a firelight, so let's look into pushing the film. We pushed it a little bit, but it like, pushed half the stop. We pushed one. It just felt a little too harsh because it expands the contrast too much. So it starts feeling brittle. Well, now we're not in this sort of whatever romantic means, in my head, it just starts looking too harsh, but I can get away with half a stop. So let's do that, So it's like a million little micro things too.
Well, you just teed up something I wanted to ask you about, which is tell me a little bit about your testing process and what you're doing in pre-production. And there's a kind of a corollary question to this, which is how much do you guys storyboard? Like, or how do you use previs, or how are you planning shots? I presume you have a shot list, obviously, but what kind of tell me about like that preparation for what the shots are going to be, and then Jarin, what you're doing in testing, because it's a lot of questions to answer, obviously.
I'll briefly do the storyboarding and then Jarin can get into the testing. So, like Jarin and I sit around and plan the shots in my kitchen. Or at least we did initially, but then, as things get moving, we have to do it in the production office. And then at times in the pass van, like, on our way to a recce. But basically, Jarin then like does thumbnail storyboards, tiny ones himself. And then we send these to Adam Pesca, our storyboard artist. Meanwhile, I'm sending him like this wallpaper, this dress, this like box, this key, these fingernails, whatever. And then Adam
these fingernails, of course, for Nosferatu, that's an important thing to sort out.
Yeah, and then Adam does his storyboards, which we give him a lot of notes. Jarin gives him even more notes than me. And actually, Adam had to change his style of working when he started working with us on the Northman, where he does like everything in a separate layer so that he can modify the storyboards to get them as specific as possible, and then for the scenes that have a longer page count with a lot of dialogue, we tend to wait until the like rehearsal process, like the 2-week rehearsals with the actors, and then Jarin is around with his cell phone, kind of like, take a look at this angle, Rob, what do you think of this? Maybe we should try this, maybe these, and we do it like that. But then we still generally storyboard it. I think there is one.
We'll send Adam a video or set it with a series of
them.
Artemis stills, of the shot, and plus a video, and then Adam can interpret that.
Great. And then Jarin, for you, about the testing process, what are the key questions that you're trying to solve? What are you trying to learn during that testing process, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, there's a lot. Like, I tested lenses because we had some high-speed lenses made just for this movie. And because our movie it fell apart once, we had some lenses on the way, but then Dan Sasaki got to do another round, so our lenses are even a little better than they would have been had we shot when we were supposed to shoot. We got 4 generations of this high-speed lens, so they're like just what we wanted, as opposed to generation 2. And I asked about some lens designs that I was just curious about, and those, came along at a certain point. One lens design called a Heliar, that Voigtlander, put out in turn of the century. We tested it, turned out, it's a beautiful lens, but not quite as good looking as these other things we've seen. So that was kind of a year and a half of testing generations of lenses throughout, like pre-production, pre-production, et cetera, amongst all the other stuff. Testing, we had a new lab to test on Czech Republic. Is this as good as our UK option? If it is, then, that would save a lot of money. We can put that elsewhere. Do we want to scan with sharpening? What degree of sharpening? We didn't want to scan with any, which was not surprising, but I'm sure every scanner is a little different. What does sharpening negative, softening to one scanner is sharpening to another. Like, what does that look like? The how much to push the film and how that relates to sharpening. And then you're building LUTs all the while, like, okay, this is our general contrast, then let's build our general grade, and then further testing, like when you test this lens, like, oh, it's a lower contrast one, does that affect? So all this stuff's in dialogue. What else? We have a birch forest. Can torches illuminate the birch forest by themselves? All right, let's go to our location where we have a nice density of birch, and we'll just get a bunch of C-stands, hold a bunch of torches. How big is our crowd? Okay, it's 22 or 25 or whatever it was. Just put it in C-stands. It'll be about this spaced out. Shoot that. All right, that's one test. Moonlight ratios. Okay, so I kind of know from the Northman what my ratios are. Let's do interior. We'll test those ratios, and I'll do third stop increments for the key light and the soft light and the fill light, all these different variations. Okay, and then we found that. Yeah, our grade, our LUT. I want to desaturate the moonlight. How much desat in the blue layer do we want to do with the red layer? So then I do a split screen with a lamp on one side, moonlight on the other for when they are mixed, and then we play around the LUT. What kind of gel is best to get the right effect? Once I have that LUT, okay, let's do that. There's some other stuff I'm not thinking of.
But in this, it's all this. Can we have snow that's not as bright for moonlight scenes? All these kinds of things, and then you can imagine when we're testing the various paint jobs on the Orlok makeup and how that holds up to screen. That's like a whole nother
convex
can of worms. So
convex mirror.
Lots of testing.
Yeah. How far away is a convex mirror? What kind of shadow? How much light do you lose? Yada yada yada. So
on a practical level, Jarin, how much?
I forgot. Yeah, all the testing of the shadow. Yeah.
Yeah, all the shadow work. 2 rounds of that. A sunrise. How bright should the sun be in the room on Orlok to like overexposed Orlok now to hide him a little bit, as opposed to the usual underexposed to hide him. So yeah,
that's amazing. How much?
We had.
Did you have?
We had a normal 16 weeks for like a bigger-ish movie, but Jarin and I moved to Prague early, so that our kids could start school on time. But that gave us a big head start on the storyboarding.
Yeah, I mean, it was for me. It was 6 months before we started shooting that I was there.
Yeah, amazing. Let's look at the first clip. This is from the very, very beginning of the film. This is the first time that we see Ellen, and it's there's some interesting stuff going on.
Come to me, a guardian angel, a spirit of comfort. Spirit of any celestial sphere. Anything. Hear my call. Come to me.
Just a practical question: the shadow on the curtain, was that a practical, or was that a VFX later on?
That was one of the few times that we couldn't do it practically. We shot shadow elements of Bill for all that stuff, but they were projected on projected on the curtains after the fact. That and the hand over the city, I think, were the only 2 things that we couldn't do practically. There were There was a couple things we did do practically, but had a little tiny bit of a double shadow, which we ended up deciding to use like an overlay of a shadow element instead, just for perfection. But the city and that shot were the two that we weren't able to do
I can
on
explain
set.
that. I need to defend myself a little bit. I actually worked really hard to get that on that curtain, but the thing is that I'll try to make this as brief as possible, which is when you shoot a hard light into a room, which we have for patterns and everything, that light, because it's hard, the relative brightness of the light at the window and deep into the room are not that different. It's maybe half a stop, because the light's so far away. What's another 10, 15 feet? Soft light's a totally different issue because the relative size of the window is now the source. It's soft light. So when you're at the window, it's a lot. And when you're 15 feet away, it's, relatively a lot less. So I had to set the exposure level for her at the beginning of the shot, which means Orlok at the window, all that soft light is just totally washed out his shadow. There's no way to do it in a oneer. If that was a separate shot, then we could have, gotten a lot closer. But that's my defense.
I mean, I
You
wasn't.
actually,
I'm not like mad about it,
I know you're not.
you
I know you're
know.
not.
But
But yeah, that is annoying that it's not practical. So
you teed up one of my other
it's
questions.
just physics, So
Of course, yeah. But yeah, Robert's love for the oneer, I'm sure complicates your life quite a lot, doesn't it, Jaron?
I'm just as
a
guilty.
mutual love.
Yeah. No, I mean it's like I don't know. I don't know that I'm any better than you, Rob. So
No, I mean, Jaron,
might be
it's a
worse.
mutual love, and if it, like, I think if anything, like when either of us comes up with something that is a couple of shots, like one or the other of us, like, is like, well, but maybe if we do this,
Yeah.
so,
Well, it's like
so
yeah, that other shot's only 90 degrees away. Like, can we motivate a pan somehow? It's like if it's more than 180 degrees, fine. If it's 90, it's like, well, you can probably figure out a blocking fix to keep us in the moment. If it's appropriate for a scene. Maybe the rhythm is off. Or it doesn't make sense. But yeah.
Yeah. I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about the color palette of the film. And I guess first question was, Robert, was there any thought? Did you think about black and white for this film? Was that
no,
something?
there's a great black and white version of the film out there, and
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
so yeah, yeah, I thought that there, like in The Witch, like there would be times when the absence of color in color would hopefully like be more effective for being, depressing or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so Jaron, I just to get a little geeky, I'm kind of curious about kind of the structure of 35 millimeter film from from a color perspective, and how did that at all affect sort of the monochromatic approach to these sequences? How did you use the actual structure of 35 to help you achieve this look from a color perspective?
The Moonlight stuff, I guess is what you're specifically
Yeah. Yeah.
referring to. Yeah, I don't know if it's different whether it's film or, I mean, we never would have shot it digitally. But if it were in another dimension. Yeah, I don't know if it would be a different approach. I think that I'm just really just exposing the blue layer and a little bit of the green layer, and that's it. So yeah, I think that would have been the same cross
But
function.
what about 35 in general, like divorced from the Moonlight stuff?
I mean, yeah, I mean, film just has a much more complex color palette. Like the layers are, I don't know, I just find there's more interaction between the three layers of the film. Like you don't get like a pure red ever. And I didn't really know why film just looks better to my taste, but I was at Camera Image and Ed Lockman was talking about it. I went to one of his talks and he was talking about how, digitally, like the three colors just look very separate. It's like you got red, blue and green, but in film they sort of like cross pollute each other in a really nice, complex way. And I think he might be right. In addition, just the color space just seems much more broad and
Well,
subtle.
I
It's
mean,
just
it makes sense. That's the difference between sensors versus,
yeah,
photochemical layers, right? Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, they're all kind of it's not pixels next to each other. They're like the layers are like literally under each other. Have to cross through, you know, one color layer to get to another. So
But I mean, it's
that looks
very
very nice. Yeah.
when red does eventually show up in some of the blood, it's quite shocking because of the way you've handled color up to that point in the film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the when I did the stage play of Nosferatu as a teenager, it was black and white on stage. It was like meant to look like a silent movie on stage with black and white makeup, black and white wigs and sets, all very humbly done, of course. But the blood was red, and in fact, there was a fascinating soft drink that I don't know if they still make anymore called Code Red Mountain Dew, and it's like it was like insanely red, and so we would actually combine stage blood with Code Red Mountain Dew so that it would be like insanely saturatedly red, and it's a little more subtle in this movie, but
But Rob
it,
never wears color, but every 2 years when he does wear color, it's red. That's the only color he will wear. So
So now I'm getting a sense that Nosferatu the film is actually the embodiment of the realization of your teenage dream to bring these images to a mass audience.
for sure.
That must be very thrilling for your teenage self to see this finally come to fruition.
It was really emotional at times. To be honest, like if it's not too nasty, gross, and pitiful to talk about, but like when I visited the backlot set and seeing the scale of this, like German city and 6 city blocks, and thinking about the humble little farm that Craig Lathrop, the production designer, built for The Witch, which seemed like a massive achievement at the time, and then thinking about the crappy little cardboard sets that me and my friends made in high school, it was quite the journey.
So since you just brought up the backlot that you built for the German city, Jarin, I'd love for you to talk about sort of. I love those daytime exterior shots in the village and everything that's going on in there. Talk about lighting on kind of a huge scale for some of those bigger sequences.
I mean, the day exteriors, you're just picking the time of day, and then you're choosing how to orient the lot to the sun as best you can. I think we really wanted.
Just interjecting quickly, and then you'll tell them how we did it. But basically, like I didn't want there to be. It needed to be always cloud cover. Every exterior needed to be cloud cover to capture the Gothic atmosphere and to make sure that the sunrise at the end has the power that it needs to have. And Focus Features was insanely supportive the whole time. And but the only thing that the studio executives were freaking out a little bit about is when we had all these extras and animals and carts and stuff on this backlot set, and we're not shooting because we're waiting for cloud cover. But Jarin, talk about some of the ways that we tried to still shoot even when the sun was out in this situation.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you're looking down the street, the line of buildings on the right is south. So and fortunately it's Czech Republic. So if it peaks, it's not that far. The other thing is that we can only look what resources to build this city backlot, but that still has its limits. So you only have was it 2 stories, Rob, or 3 in some cases? 2, I think.
So in some cases, but mostly 2 stories.
Yeah, but you have to put something there because light doesn't if in the movie there are 5 floors, it's much more vertical light than if it's just simply coming in from the sides. You want this sort of more of a top light feel. So I was just trying to find a way to make that a little more vertical, and we're trying to put these kind of black fabric sides and stuff. I think next time we can have it more in the have construction do it. It'd be a little better. Can't wait to do that. But yeah, I was just just trying to black out, extend the buildings just as far as blacks, just to make it more vertical, which then helps, block the sun, which fortunately in Czech Republic, in whenever we shot that March is still relatively low. It's not peaking that high. So we knew to schedule like, well, if it's sunny, we do it sort of, before 10 a.m. or after 3, then, we're kind of fine. But that's all you can do because like there was no practical way to like tent everything, overhead at that scale either. So the best we could do is just put up those blacks.
Big and too windy.
The sun's coming in this direction anyway at that time of year. So
Yeah.
not this way.
So one of my favorite scenes in the film, from a visual perspective, is Thomas's journey to Orlok's castle, and specifically I think the crossroads sequence where he gets in the carriage and then it's taken up to and it's so first of all, like you kind of thematically you understand, okay, we're going to meet Orlok for the first time in the castle, like this is going to be very disturbing, very creepy, but then you creeped me out even more with the sequence before when he gets up and then even before that you creeped me out with the Roma village sequence before we even get to the carriage to get to the castle. So it's just like you're taking us on this literal journey, but you're also escalating kind of the freak out and the tension. But I would love for you to talk just a little bit about that visual sequence of the Thomas getting in that carriage and then riding up to the castle was so striking. I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about, was that a practical location? Did you do that on stage? Tell me a little bit about that particular part of the sequence.
I mean, the village was a Transylvanian village that we built like in the Czech Republic. We visited a lot of vernacular architecture museums in Romania to get the look right and so on and so forth. And then but yeah, the sandstone pillars that Nicholas Hoult is on and crosses the little bridge is a very famous rock formation in the Czech Republic that we frankly didn't want to use because it didn't look Romanian, but the mountains that looked more like Transylvania were in the northeast of the Czech Republic on the Polish border, and they were snowed in and we couldn't access them. So then the crossroads was a practical location, but we must have scouted
8? Is that much?
At least 8.
Oh, okay.
At least
could be. I mean, it was over months, so.
Yeah, it was really hard to find a crossroads that was like exactly a perfect cross that had enough trees for me to feel like it looked really dense, but had but not so many trees that Jarin could still light it, because if it was too
which is shockingly difficult. Yeah, because it's like it needs to be claustrophobic like a canyon, but if branches are too, or or maybe there was one, but the branches just branch out too much and it's way up there, you can't cut them, So we gotta nix that one, So it's that Goldilocks zone as far as the trees, and sometimes it was like this, but then this one's like a little bit like this. Also, we found one where it's like, I don't know if it's a forestry road or what, but like we have our main crossroads, but then there's like another crossroads after that where we can drive a lift and go around the corner and then, put up this 120-foot frickin' lift, and then I had 2 in depth too. So you just get the scale of the shot. So it really helped lighting wise, just because like having the trees, because all you're really concerned about is this strip. Normally, like in the Northman or something, you have to do these swaths, left and right. Here, it's really, I just need to be concerned with that. So, and then again, it's just amazing what just craft basics will do as far as lighting ratios, so it's like that's your main light and that's at a certain level, and then you have your top light, which is a balloon between the camera and the sub, in Thomas, and that's at a much lower level, but strong enough to be directional, like to feel like it's coming into that canyon. And you have your fill light, to just see just enough of his face, but not too bright, because then you lose your contrast and your mood. So yeah, ratios is kind of everything, like the same setup with slightly different ratios look like hell, so that's really, ratios is very important.
We have another clip. Let's take a look at The Midnight Hour Has Passed. This is from the arrival at the castle. Amazing. So creepy. I'm just kind of curious, you storyboard everything. How much does a sequence like that resemble the storyboards that you went out to shoot? And how much you kind of figure out on the day?
Generally we are like we are very slavish to the storyboards. That was ever so slightly different for two reasons. One was that we thought we were going to be using the courtyard of Hunidawara Castle, and we ended up using a courtyard of the main money shot exteriors of the castle are Hunidawara Castle. So when we go over the drawbridge, that's Hunidawara, a castle in Transylvania. But then the gatehouse is a Pershing castle in the Czech Republic. So that made things like ever so slightly different because I don't know that we'd bothered to redraw it, did we?
I don't know. I mean, maybe, we must have scouted it, and I must have taken Artemis still and sent it to Adam, but maybe I don't know. Was it so late?
I don't know. I don't know that we had time. I don't know.
Normally
Anyway.
we'll send him. Normally it's like, here's a location. We'll just shoot, accurate stills on location, have him draw that, or like a rehearsal or something,
Yeah.
with the actors.
But basically, the shot with where we were over the carriage and it tilts up to the castle, that was one of the few shots that did have an animatic, so that for pacing and stuff. And basically, in the script, there's this moment where Thomas is inside the carriage, and all of a sudden he realizes he's not in the carriage. But the actual, like, how that shot was conceived was Jarin, where its idea, and that shot was rehearsed on stage many times before we got to the location. To actually shoot it.
That has some, a lot of moving pieces as far as what he's sitting on, and leaning against needs to like go away by the time we, because we're like close enough on the eyes that then everything kind of flies away, so he can then walk away. And we have like fake legs. I know it's so dark in there that you probably don't even to watch the movie 5 times to see it, but like, to see his legs, but actually he's standing with like dummy legs, and we get to his eye, and the dummy legs go, split apart. And then so the dolly can then push through them. I have a video of this somewhere in my phone, actually.
That's cool.
So yeah, there's a lot of pieces. Then you have to, we're building it around a certain focal length of lens, and not just a generic 35, but a Dagor 35, which has a certain viewing angle. It's 40 degrees, and then you have to sort of space out the shot to that particular focal length. So
the one other thing that wasn't storyboarded was the doors closing behind Thomas. Like, we were like shooting that, and it wasn't storyboarded. It was just, and I was often saying cut as as the doors were closing, and Chris Columbus, the producer, like runs up to me and it's like, dude, you've got to shoot that. You've got to shoot that, and so that was, and he recommended a lot of extra shots, but that was the one that
take that one.
made
Yeah.
it into the
that frame is I forgot that, but that's probably why that frame's just a little funny. Like there's just a lot more. There's a lot more ground.
Because it was the grab. Yeah.
Yeah, that composition always kind of bothers me, but that's probably why. It's like one of the few times.
Bothers you. It looks stunning.
No, when they close, it's just the camera's just a little, and it doesn't match the other one. It's just a little off. But okay.
Jarin, was for a lot of these interiors, I feel like you were wide open on your aperture. Is that correct, or kind of what were you favoring? I'm even like Orlok and Thomas in the castle. That's sort of
Firelight is generally. I mean, we had the high speed lenses, which our 35 is our primary lens. That opened to a 1.1. A
1.1
that way. Yeah. So
wow.
That was only used at that aperture probably twice. I think with the innkeeper's wife or mother, she has a single candle next to her face, a triple wick candle. That I think that was 1.1, maybe one other place, but really, our exteriors are shot like a 2.8, so I didn't want to go too crazy. So it's like 1.4 and a third probably most of the time.
So Robert,
for the Firelight, everything else is like a 2.8. Yeah.
No, for sure. But look, I mean, you're not getting a huge depth of field at those apertures. So Robert, I'm kind of curious for your experience with directing the actors when you have, if they move very much, they're going to start buzzing. So what, did they find a kind of liberation in these structures, or was it maddening for them? Or kind of talk about the process of taking your actors through kind of dealing with the depth of field issues.
I think that it's not just depth of field, it's the rigorous composition as well. Like, and so even in some of the scenes that are like day interiors in the Harding's house, and there's a whole lot of people and blocking going on, like it's just as rigorous about the actors hitting their marks. And I think anytime there's a new actor, they are sort of a little nervous about like getting into this, but once they get into the flow, then I do, as you say, that I think very often they say there is a kind of liberation because you get to and be more in the moment than ever, because like there's nothing to consider but like, you know, what you're doing. So I think but look, like it can take an adjustment. I know like Alex Skarsgård talks about in The Northman feeling like he was a puppet in the beginning, and then there was a breakthrough where he began to really love it. So it's not it's not how everyone works, but
I mean,
it's how we work. And the cool thing also though is that because we've done a few movies like that, I'm like all the actors I'm working with like really want to be there and are hungry for it. So they're up for doing something different in service of this type of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ashley Bond, is a supreme focus puller. So that was never really, that didn't really, I totally took advantage of him. And and that was never a confinement for the actors. It was never like, oh, don't move too fast. I mean, the innkeeper's mom or mother, is that, well, not wife, it's mother, right?
I've been calling her the innkeeper's mother-in-law, but in any case,
Okay,
like
mother-in-law,
the
yeah.
old woman
Anyway,
who shows Thomas around the inn, she was a
Yeah.
non-actor.
a non-actor, and it's in focus, with a single candle at T1.1. I mean, he's like, this is a supreme focus puller. So
He almost died that night, like,
yeah.
but he he nailed it.
And it's, we're all over the place, so yeah, can't sing his praises enough.
Amazing. We're going to go to audience questions in just a couple minutes, but just one final question. I would love for you guys to talk a little bit about the grading process. Robert, I think I told you previously, I got to see Nosferatu in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos at one of our screening rooms. And even that, we saw that first shot where Ellen rises up into frame. And when I saw it in our theater, it was almost like she rose out of this inky blackness into the frame, and it was just stunning. And obviously you've got a very, you're using contrast and dynamic range, the highlights between the flames and then the dark parts of the frame. It's just stunning in the film. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how, Jarin, are you in the color grading suite through the entire process? Kind of like tell us about how you
yes,
because that's not always the case. But I'd love for you to talk about your approach to grading.
I hear about cinematographers, I won't name them, but yeah, sometimes their producer will be like, well, so and so did it in this many weeks. I'm like, well, that's so and so. I want to be there as long as possible. Look, we got a lot of time, a lot of formats these days too. It's not like you're just doing a print and then home. You have your DCP, you got your Dolby, which by the way is the best way to see the movie. I put 35 in, I hate saying this, but like 35 a little below that. Then you got IMAX and, then you have home, then you have HDR, you have all this stuff. So that takes a lot of time in itself. So, and you're hopping around. I like to hop around the grades just because you get like fresh perspectives. You do DCP for a while and then you see, your Dolby. It's like, oh, and then you go back to the DCP, like, oh, and then, but they sort of influence each other and like home. And then it's like, there's something separates a certain way in one format and you want to like sort of emphasize. So it's all kind of cool. And then it's just enough to, yeah.
I mean, Jarin is leading the grade. Like Jarin is in the grade every single day. like I'm often like having to piggyback because I'm working with like the sound team
Hmm.
or whatever. So, so then I come in and like review things and give notes. But I mean, like Jaren's like in the driver's seat, in terms of the grade, uh, for sure.
Yeah, and then you go away on like Christmas break, and then you come back and you see something fresh, and that's like, and you just need time to like match all of your moonlight across the entire film and then match all your firelight across the film, et cetera, and then it's just having time to see stuff, take breaks and see stuff fresh. Sometimes we just take 2 weeks away anyway, bank holiday or whatever, and then you come back, it's like, oh, now I know why, so it's
Yeah, and you're all of a sudden like, wow, like reel one
I,
is like insanely dark. How the hell did that happen? Whatever.
Well, it does look stunning in Dolby Vision. Thank you for saying nice things about that.
it's the MF and truth.
We appreciate it. Let's open up and take some audience questions, please.
Terrific. Yeah, we have a whole bunch of questions submitted to us. Let's start with this one. For Robert, in your films like The Witch and The Lighthouse, evil seems more diffuse, permeating the space and circumstances rather than being personified. With Nosferatu, where evil manifests in a tangible form, how challenging was it to translate this presence onto the screen, embodied in such an iconic character? How does this shift impact your way of filmmaking?
Well, it was kind of a bummer in some ways, and certainly an obstacle because I would knew that I was going to at the end of the film have to go against my principles in not showing the monster, because we have to show the monster at the end in bright daylight. So that was tricky because all through the rest of the film, we're able to just show him in shadow and even, when we see him clearly, it's a quick glimpse in the crypt scene. So it was challenging, and there was a lot of testing involved in trying to make the makeup look as realistic as possible under the scrutiny of the daylight. And it was, I mean, one of the things that's frustrating about that though is that the makeup in every other scene had a ton of detail, and in that scene we actually had to like dial down the detail because with all the detailed painting that David White, the prosthetics designer, and his team were doing, when it had that kind of bright light and scrutiny, it looked like makeup and not like a real dead human. So it was definitely an interesting challenge. Like if like, but it's in Alien 1 when you barely see the xenomorph, I love that. And I always hate like seeing the full body of the xenomorph so clearly like at the very end of the film, and I wish that shot wasn't there. And in this case, I had no choice but to show my xenomorph.
That's great. Another question. This is for both of you. This is sort of a few questions about candlelight. I love the use of candlelight and fire to light some scenes. Could you both expand on that choice and its importance to you as well as the film? Were there any difficulties with that while shooting on film?
I mean, it's candlelit because in Transylvania because it would have been, and then Jarin, you can speak about, why we're actually using practical fire
Yeah,
rather than.
I think if you can use real fire, I mean, it's a few things. Like we did a lot of fake electric firelight in The Northman because I was shooting slower film, and at that point, I just like to push. I like us to push ourselves creatively and technically as much as we can. So the lighthouse needed a lot of light, just do the film stock and the filtering, and the Northman, I wanted a very clean look. That's just what I was interested at the time. So that's slow film and a lot of electric firelight, and also the scope. Having firelight reach, it was like a bunch of 500-watt bulbs and programming and all this stuff. And there was an appeal in just going back to the real thing, and also just like the production design and the costumes and the dialogue being as, I don't know, realistic as it could be. I just wanted to, keep that spirit and, of authenticity, even though it's in the lighting. So I wanted the flame to look like, as close to the real thing as possible. And so, yeah, you have high-speed film pushed to half stop and some, bespoke lenses that can handle it. Let's do that, and then it's just a matter of shaping it. It's just like a tool like anything else, it's flame, but just deciding that it's on one, let's favor one side so it still has shape. It's not like you just scatter candles everywhere, so they are triple wick. They melt 3 times as fast because of that. It's a fucking mess. Wax pooling all over the place, and then you put like
Candles falling off of chandeliers onto nuns' habits.
Yeah.
Like it was hairy at
Yeah.
times.
But looks good, and the film is out there and fixed in time for the world. So, and nothing caught on fire. Great.
Terrific. Another question we have in the chat. The hallway scene where Anna encounters Ellen after Thomas pushes her off the bed always catches my attention. How was the hallway's darkness achieved? Anna's gas lamp was the only light source, yet it seemed carefully controlled to avoid illuminating the background and revealing Ellen too soon.
Who should take this, Rob?
I mean, go for it, but
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's, if she holds a lamp close to her, there's just the inverse square law, right? So the light, if you keep it close, to your person, and light yourself relatively high, the walls will fall off a lot, and then just finding the right amount of fog to spread it and soften it a little, but not too much. And yeah, and that's on a dimmer that has a cable that is then erased. That one is electric because gas flame is not going to do jack squat.
it was actually really interesting because we tested some actual practical gas lamps from the period, and the remarkable thing about them is that they do not flicker. The light is like insanely consistent.
And also not very yellow. It's actually not warm. That was the other discovery. But yeah, but she's using the thing, and then we pan off. I have so much to talk about. Okay, try to be efficient. We pan off of Anna, and then we got to like crank it up, to see the staircase, and then come back. So it has to be electric for that reason. Just get the right exposure. Rob was he was having me watch all these YouTube videos on like how to construct jump scares, because that was like a big thing. Like it felt like a cop out. We didn't really know how to make a jump scare in The Witch. So let's not cop out, let's try to do just a genuine jump scare. So it was like analyzing jump scares that work and jump scares that don't. So we're just like, it's like figuring out, like learning baking off the internet. We're learning how to do this. And so, yeah, it had all these rules. It was like, I think it had to be like 2 minutes of tension or something, Rob. And then it's like, you have to, build up something and then show it's okay. And then you hit them, that sort of thing. So, you pan over, there's nothing there, and you pan back, and then you think that that's when it's going to happen. And you land on her, and it's not there. And then that's when Ellen's revealed. The idea initially was that she's holding a lamp, and her body is blocking Ellen. But then, once you get on set and that lamp's burning, it's actually, she wasn't, these are, the blocking wasn't really happening. You couldn't really, block her. But if you have a lamp here, it's actually projecting this, and her shadow is bigger than herself. So let's do it with the lamp, just the lamp shadow. It's just like then you move it a little, and then she's revealed. So that was like a nice discovery on the set on the day. Even though the general idea was exactly what was boarded, it's like it's just the difference of let's do it with light instead of like literally her stacking Ellen. So that was That's
And
nice.
then we were able to also darken Lily and the Grade even more, so that
Yeah.
it is, but and it's a very classical jump scare, and the audience knows it's coming, and and is like expecting it, to see, what is it going to be? They don't know, but like everyone knows that this is clearly going to happen. But that's, part of making a Gothic horror movie, like that's in conversation with horror movie history,
I'm definitely going to need you guys to include the YouTube video on how to make a jump scare in the Blu-ray DVD, the extras on the Blu-ray for this film.
Sure, we can find it. Yeah.
Speaking of blocking, there was a question in the chat. What are your general rules and strategies for blocking chamber dialogue scenes? The camera in these scenes, such as Harding's party, feels invisible and always motivated from movement or dialogue shifts.
It's mainly breaking it down to like major beat changes and we often are just from one character's perspective, but sometimes there's a time when we need to like pass the baton to another character's perspective, and that can influence the way the camera moves. But I think, to some degree, like there is a simplistic way in which it is at times not too dissimilar from how you might storyboard the film with more than one shot, where it's like you start with an insert and then you go to like a medium close up and then you cut to a 2-shot and then you cut to a wide shot. But instead we just like move the camera from the locket to the person who holding the locket to 2 people and out to, to some degree there.
And even that, it's like, I'll add to that, but it's like, even that, it's usually most eloquently done just moving the actor as opposed to the camera, or a tandem of, or a mix of both. It's just sort of like, well, the actor just, all right, then Wilma walk into the background and that to offer schnapps, because that just makes a wide shot inherently. That's much more elegant than we just like pull back, right? So that's just more for the actors to do once again. But that's that's the most eloquent solution most of the time. It's just like very simple, or maybe a linear camera move, and you just place the areas of interest within, foreground or background, or make your compositions that way. And that might even extend to how the set is built,
Very often it does.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm afraid we only have a couple minutes left. Before we wrap up, Robert and Jarin, do you have any final words you'd like to share with our collab community today? We have still about 600 people watching live.
Why don't we just do a couple more questions from the audience, or, Glenn, if there's something you're burning to ask. But I think that, my only quick thing is just, as aspiring filmmakers, make relationships. Like, it's not about schmoozing, it's not about ladder climbing, it's about connecting with people that you like really get along with and see cinema in the same way. You might be like a PA on a horrible short film that's like the worst thing you've ever worked on in your life, and you might meet someone working at craft service who you get along with, and you guys can end up collaborating in the future. These kinds of connections.
Yeah. Well, also the other thing is like, be yourself, everyone else is taken. It's definitely true creatively, and that's at least as far as like if you're able to pursue a long-term strategy, so which was very expensive for me to be, I had a little bit of hardship just trying to like just do exactly what I wanted to do. But as a long-term strategy, it seems to have worked out. But cost was high, but I'm like with this guy making films exactly the way I want to. So
great. Well, if we have time for one more question, I think that there's one that'll be relevant to a lot of folks in the audience from the chat. What are your tips for lighting horror films on a budget? How do you create an eerie atmosphere via light for something smaller like your short film, Telltale Heart? And how does that compare with something bigger like Nosferatu?
I don't, I mean, it's the same stuff, just do less things better, right? So, I mean, the part of the reason that shots are blocked, or scenes are blocked as many or as few shots as possible, it's kind of like it's just hanging on from, for me, from doing indie films in white apartments in New York, where it's like I can't make every direction look great, and the schedule is utter shit. And how do we block this in one simple thing? Just one good thing. Let's not do it in five. Let's just not rush through five things. So, and even on those films, if you fight for it, or or if you just plan carefully, you can have enough prep to think about these things, before everyone comes on board and everyone's just staring at you on set horribly. I mean, that's still the truth. Just do fewer things better. Don't have too many, don't have a window and a lamp and a this and a that and a top light, and it's just like just one. That's what I like to look at, just, a scene in Manhattan shot by Gordon Willis, with just like, oh yeah, it's just two people against a lamp, and it's just one good idea.
Many thanks to Sundance Collab for inviting me to moderate this terrific conversation, and to our friends at Focus Features for providing those excellent clips showcasing Jarin's work. And of course, an extra special thanks to Robert Eggers and Jarin Blaschke for joining us today. We wish you the best of luck at the 97th Academy Awards, which will take place live at the Dolby Theater in Hollywood on Sunday, March 2nd. But before the big show, be sure to check out Nosferatu in Jarin's favorite format, Dolby Vision, as well as Dolby Atmos. We will have links, as always, in our show notes. And speaking of the Oscars, if you'd like even more conversations with fellow Academy Award nominees in this category and more, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. Many of these awards are tough to pick and predict, and we will continue to offer in-depth interviews filled with unique insights into the work of these nominated artists, which may make it just a little easier for you to fill out your Oscar ballot, whether you are an Academy voter or simply want to do better in your annual Oscar office pool. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.